Hello, and welcome to the fourth installment of Chai and Biscuits. In today's episode, we are going to discuss one of the most interesting and drawn out sagas of Barcelona Football Club. How their biggest ever player left the club. We also go a little bit into the infamous levers and how, in spite of having a reputation that they are broke, still managed to have one of the best transfer windows in recent history. Without further ado, let's dig in.
Parece pasando nuevo centro. ¡Gol!
All right, now that we have our chai and biscuits ready, Rohit, where do you think we should even start with this huge story?
I believe we should start with the interview that Messi gave to Goal. Usually, Messi doesn't give any interviews. He's very shy and keeps to himself. And the fact that he came out, sat for a one-on-one interview with Goal, was groundbreaking. And I think all of us were waiting to hear what was going to happen with his future. Let's just go over some major points from that interview. I think at this point, he had been telling the president that he wanted to leave for almost a year, but all he heard back was that they would be talking at the end of the season. He had, I think the contract was until 2020, and if he didn't inform the club by June 10th that he wanted to leave, then the club can extend uh, for 1 year. This meant that if he wanted to
Mhm.
leave, there would be no release clause and he could go to any club without any problem at this point. Unfortunately, COVID happened,
Right.
and the whole football season schedule was disrupted. Barca
Yes.
were in all competitions, including Champions League at this point. So he didn't want this issue of his contract obviously affecting his form, his teammates, or anything to affect the season as a whole. And he believed that because the season was still going on, he could basically just give this information that he wanted to leave at the end of the season.
Right.
But
Mhm.
unfortunately, Bartholomew, the president, didn't see it that way. He understood it to be that at June 10th, which was stated in the contract, so he had to inform the club by June 10th. And there was a misunderstanding in how basically the rule worked, because even though June 10th was mentioned in the contract, Messi saw it as at the end of the season, but Bartomeu saw it as a specific date before which Messi had to inform the club.
Yeah.
So Messi could have taken the club to court, but it could have gone either way. So it basically depended on how the court would see it. And Messi definitely did not want to take his beloved club to court. And especially with the fact that it could go either way. So it would have just been a drawn out saga. At this point, he sent a fax to the club, making it official that he would be leaving the following year. So the 1 year extension came into account, and by 2021, he would be leaving. That was his information to the club. But at this point, we're forgetting why Messi wanted to leave in the first place. Why did Messi want to leave his club that he grew up in, where he became this huge global world beater after 20 years at Barcelona? I think that's something that a fan like Abhishek, who's been following the club for a long time, can answer.
Yeah, Rohit, I think to be honest, I would start with by saying that that interview that Messi gave was it gave me a gutted feeling. As a Barcelona long time Barcelona fan, watching Messi grow up with Barcelona, playing all the in the youth team, uh, and almost like making Barcelona compete at the top level. uh, it was very bad, but I also wanted to understand what factors would have forced Messi to be in that position where he has to leave his boyhood club, his club where he grew up, so that kind of made me thinking. And there were cracks all over the squad, that all over the seasons, that previous seasons he was there. First was that defeat at Roma, which kind of exposed the aging and demoralized squad that we had. The same thing got repeated in Anfield as well, where Barcelona were leading because of Messi, where he scored that amazing free kick against Allison. Yep,
Allison.
yep. And it was 3-0, and we all had to do was, see out that lead in Anfield. But, there we were again, with the aging defense, Jordi Alba crying in the halftime at the locker room. I think we all know that scenes. But I would like to, focus back to the same thing, what Messi had been seeing. He didn't want to waste his prime years and with the with Bartomeu, and mismanaging everything, from basically contracts, handing out contracts, super long contracts to players who didn't deserve it, and also buying players out of the blue, for so much money, who didn't, without any plans whatsoever in the team. For example, Coutinho was bought from Liverpool for 120 million plus, but there was no position for Coutinho to play in. Uh, so, so he got the sense of no, squad rebuilding, and the plan was just to buy the current biggest name out there. You know, so I could understand why would Messi. There were so many other factors like his wage being leaked to the media. That's one of the factors too. You didn't want uh, his wages to be leaked to general public out there, when everybody were in COVID scenario, everybody was dying and everything, so it was a bad scenario. So at this point, Guardiola with his super team in City were also winning and everything, and with Messi Guardiola connection, the world would wanted to see that. And I think that's at this point where Messi thought about his future. Like he could use his prime years, or the remaining of his prime years, with Guardiola, and conquer the world or Europe again. So yeah, those rumors were circling, and I felt that it was a time for Messi to kind of leave Barcelona.
But I think what you meant about the there was no plan for the
Mhm.
future of the squad
Yeah.
make a lot of sense, because I remember there were a huge, almost every window there used to be some random player just coming in. I remember Paulinho, from an ex Tottenham player, just joining, playing a few
Mhm.
crazy games, and then leaving to China. There was, I think, a centre back from France, Matthew, and he was there for a few years. He played here and there.
all part of shady deals that Bartomeu had been doing for years.
We forgot the Arthur and
Panic swap.
Panic
Yep, yep.
swap deal with Juventus.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that was there.
Yeah, some of these deals were crazy. That as a even as a fan of just football from another league, you're watching this thinking, what exactly is happening? How do they even have the money for it?
Yeah,
What is
exactly. And
what is happening basically?
imagine
Yeah, I
Messi
agree with
living
what you
living
said.
all of this, and seeing all of the back room mess that he had been seeing for all these years. I think at this point, any person, yeah, even Messi, would have thought about his future at the club.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Definitely some chaotic times for Barcelona in 2020. They just appointed Koeman for the season, and we all know how that season went. So, speaking about, so moving back to our topic, Barcelona football club, how they were evolving. Speaking about the plans for future, I have a wild theory. This I think, like, this big Messi's interview was the first step of a master plan to remove Bartomeu from presidency and get Juan Laporta back. The facts from Messi, along with the interview that we just discussed, and following that, in October 2020, more than 20,000 club members signed a motion to remove Bartomeu from the presidency. So and later that week, Bartomeu and the whole board submitted the resignation, and because resentment had grown in the leadership, worsening finances, like we just discussed, and the decline on the pitch. We forgot the 8-2 defeat in one leg quarterfinals in Champions League in 2020 in Lisbon. They lost 8-2 to Bayern Munich. So uh, things like this, uh, all led to, I feel it was a master plan to get Laporta back. So, and coincidentally at the same time, Laporta started his presidential campaign, and with his main manifesto of Messi staying, that promising that Messi will stay, and bringing an audit of finances to that brought light of so many shady deals, and as well as how much the 600 million the club had losses on.
One thing you mentioned was that the 8-2 defeat, it was one of the, I think a couple of goals were actually scored by Coutinho, weren't they?
I think he scored a hat trick there.
An ex-player, he was on loan
From
from
Barcelona,
Barcelona
yeah.
to Bayern, which
Hmm.
itself was a crazy,
And he came on a second half substitute as
Hmm.
well.
yeah, continuation of these crazy deals. And the 20,000 club members that you mentioned, so Barcelona is one of these um, clubs that have a different ownership model, aren't they? They're basically not owned by a particular person or a group of companies, but they're owned by their fans, if I'm right.
Yep, yep, that's true. It has been always been a member-owned club, and I think Real Madrid and Athletic Bilbao are one of those three remaining clubs in La Liga right now who are member-owned. Yeah, I think they're extinct breed, man.
Mm.
Yeah, you don't see many of them out there.
Uh, so yeah, to brief our audience, till now we discussed Messi's interview. We discussed a wild theory of this that being a master plan to remove Bartomeu from presidency. Then Laporta starting his presidential campaign, and we all know that plan worked out, right? The plan worked out, and Laporta came into presidency. He started working on his manifesto. He started working on his plans. The first one, obviously, to the priority is for Messi to stay. But then the biggest twist in the story, Messi leaving to PSG. Uh, it was a shock as well as a very sad moment in Barcelona's history. Their biggest player leaving. So, what is this? What happened there? Why was it? Why was Laporta not able to keep his election promise?
I think there was also a crazy rumor going around that Messi's new contract couldn't be lower than 50% of his previous salary. So even if he wanted to play for free, would that even have been possible? That's something that we were hearing, like he would be ready to play for free. And this 50% weird thing, some people, we accepted it as truth. Some people didn't agree to it, like it can't be lower than 50%. I think there is a rule that states that if a player comes from a top 5 league and has played a certain number of matches, it doesn't matter what is agreed, the amount of wages that is agreed and written in the contract. The registration body of La Liga takes about 50% of the player's previous wages and checks that amount against the club's SCL.
Yeah, the squad cost limit, basically. Yep.
And lowering that amount is impossible without extending that contract longer.
Yeah.
And
So
the maximum salary that increase can be is 30%.
agreed.
Yeah.
Yep, yep. And I think that rule applies only to La Liga's second division, though. Yeah, there were a lot of fake, or I would say, bizarre rumors, and it's one of those where this rule applies to La Liga's second division, not the first division. So basically, first thing I have a theory where I think Laporta could have renewed Messi's contract. That way, Messi would stay within the wage limit instead of signing him on as a new player, which Barcelona couldn't do because of their wage bill. And the second,
Okay. So
yeah,
so Messi could have extended his contract basically.
Yeah. So the squad limit, or let's say La Liga's economic control for every season, how it works, I'll just give you a brief summary for even for the listeners. So every season, La Liga clubs, they have to have a budget for the upcoming season, and from that budget, uh, which will have the projected revenue, for example, 100 million, and then you subtract your non-budgetary expenses like non-sporting expenses including debts. So for example, if you have a lot of debts that like Barcelona had because of the COVID and everything, whatever factors and mismanagement of contracts, the squad cost limit or the wage bill, like it's always known, uh, was very low. So what that meant was, any new player who would come in wouldn't be able to register for Barcelona or play for Barcelona if they were not within the squad cost limit. So I think Laporta knew about this, but he didn't, still didn't renew the contract. But I don't know. It could have been any of those scenarios where he didn't have idea of how much Barcelona were in the losses.
I think the wages thing is so crazy because over the last few years, Barcelona was one of the first clubs to have a revenue of 1 billion uh, in just basically 1 million, I think, euros.
Yeah.
1 billion euros in revenue, which is crazy. And I remember another stat around this time: more than 90% of this revenue was going towards wages. Am I
Yeah,
right?
yep. We have the world's highest paid goalkeepers, center backs, midfielders, and attackers. You name it. Even Bartomeu was responsible for Griezmann's contract as well, which would increase every year. So you would understand uh, that some of those contracts were huge. So when Laporta took office or got into the office, he saw that this mess was something that he has to make control. So I think in the back of his mind, he had this huge strategic plan which he implemented from 2021 to 2026, which is actually written in Barcelona's website as well. A strategic plan to recover Barcelona's financial mess, and in that he plans to implement how do I say this, a wage structure, a certain limit of wage structure. So as we hear it now, it's a 10 million wage structure. So if people, you sign somebody, it should not be higher than 10 million, is what they say.
But don't almost every doesn't every football club have debt? I'm sure it's not like 1.3 billion dollars in debt like Barcelona has, but Arsenal has debt. United have debt to their owners. So how is this different, and why is it so big?
Yeah, I think it's a right good question actually, Rohit. So for the listeners, I don't want to get into the statistics and the math, but I'll just give you in a percentage wise of what that big 1.3 billion debt is. So basically, what Laporta did was he kind of managed all of the losses that the club had for the past two seasons into one big long-term, you know, uh, how do you say, loan, which he took from Goldman Sachs. So instead of paying every club for, let's say, player transfers and fees, they're just paying Goldman Sachs with a certain interest rate. But to explain the 1.3 billion debt and what it is, I'll just say 40% of that debt is, which is like 400 million, is a lawsuits risk, like future liabilities. Every club, like you said, Manchester United and everybody have to keep aside some of the debt for any pending lawsuits or something that they might incur in the future. So in accounting wise, you have to keep it as a debt. So in that 400 million, only 90 million is high risk, which means that there's a high probability that Barcelona will have to pay that money in case they lose the litigation or the lawsuit. And the rest is a remote risk. Remote risk here doesn't mean that they will lose the uh, lawsuit, but it's part of that. And the other 300 million is for deferral of sporting costs. In this summer, you probably heard of a lot of deferral of wages, which Bartomeu actually signed. So did Laporta. So what happened was a lot of the money, there was not much income coming in due to COVID and losing on match day revenues. So Bartomeu suggested you defer your wages, and out of that 300 million is deferral of cost, your wages. It could be loyalty bonuses, signing bonuses, or end of contract bonuses, that make up that money. And the other 300 million is player transfers. So it's basically self-explanatory at this point. When you purchase some player, you pay the amount that is pending. But some people think, for example, this summer Barcelona have purchased Rafinha from Leeds, and it was 50, let's say 50 million. So the club has to pay 50 million to Leeds, but that doesn't mean that the club actually pays 50 million on the day of the transfer. It's spread out over a period of years. This is all discussed between the clubs, and they discuss the every amount in a certain period. Like for example, 10 million the first year, 10 million the second year. This goes on. So these 306 million that was pending in the debt is from those purchase of players, and that's basically the, I would say, the percentage, 40, 30, 30% of the 1.3 billion debt that kind of compromises Barcelona's debt. And yeah, like I said, I think most of this debt is not current or payable right now. So it was a genius stroke, I would say, from Laporta's to uh, put this in a long term loan. And the other thing I wanted to touch on, I would say, was unlike other leagues in English Premier League or like Syria, La Liga's financial control is more proactive, which means that the league actively makes life very hard for any club that kind of violates these rules. So while, let's say, Chelsea or United, like you mentioned, had debts, they face retroactive punishments if they don't stay under those financial rules, like, for example, getting fined or league point deductions. But Spanish clubs, they can't register new players unless they can generate additional revenue or significantly cut costs. For example, like uh, losing players of value of Ansu Fati or Pedri or Gavi. And I think that's one of the reasons that Laporta, instead of choosing to let go of these players, high value players, he added additional income to increase the squad bill so that he can register new players. So that's why Laporta had to pull those economic levers that we talk about much.
Yeah, I understand what you mean about it being different from the English Premier League, because in England we've seen a lot of these happening with especially Rooney's Derby and Middlesbrough, and even Rangers had to go into administration in the recent past.
Yep.
Okay. So let's talk about these levers. I've heard all summer window about these levers. How Barcelona has no money but still keeps signing players. How Barcelona cannot register players. It was there was a lot of talk about these levers. So can you explain our listeners who wants to know more about these levers?
Yeah, I think this is the window of levers, like you would say, Sandy. But for I would say that these levers, like I mentioned earlier, were necessary to generate additional income. So, as a public-owned club, you don't have a private owner who can come in and inject money into your,
Hmm.
let's say, capital, like Spurs did. Spurs ENIC, I think Spurs ENIC is one of the shareholders for Spurs, and I think they injected 150 million into the capital or revenue stream. So that's something that Barcelona cannot do. So they had to sell some of their own, I would say, assets to generate cost to increase the squad bill or the wage bill. So one of that, I think, was I think three levers were approved by the assembly, and one of the first levers that was pulled was selling the TV rights for 25-year
Hmm.
long deal, and it generated around 600 million odd. And the other lever that was pulled was selling minority share, 49.9% of Barca Studios to Socios.com. So these two levers kind of handle the, made up for the losses that Barcelona had for the past two seasons, and they no longer had to, comply with the uh, La Liga's, I would say, economic control for the wage bill.
So, as I understand it, this is basically, in simpler terms, uh, steps that the club can take towards bringing in more revenue. So, first step, and because that was the first step wasn't enough, a second
Hmm.
step that they had
Exactly.
to take,
Exactly.
right?
Yep. Yep. And I think I have this analogy, when people ask me in simpler terms of how Barcelona is still able to purchase new players with this much debt. I have this example in simpler terms, which is like, for example, if you want to purchase your dream house, which is let's say around $200 million, but $200,000, uh, and but you don't have that money saved up, you take a loan from the bank. That means that means that you are in debt already. So, but that doesn't mean that you cannot buy your food or
Mhm.
grocery, right? So if you keep paying the bank your mortgage every month, and that means you can still purchase food and go on vacation, maybe. So these are things, that kind of works in the financial accounting world as well.
So there were two problems. One is one what everyone thought is was there was no money, but activating these levers, you got the money to buy the players. But then there was the second problem that we discussed in the beginning, which is not able to register the players because of the La Liga's economic or rules, which were different to Premier League. Yep, I think it is clear now. Uh, what do you guys think?
Yep. I think there were many options, like Laporta could have gone for another option, like signing 100% of TV rights, like they did in 2006 for like a 1 billion. I think there was one of the
Mhm.
offer that came in as well, which was put in the General Assembly, but they rejected it because since it was 100% of TV rights, and TV rights generally increase year over year, so signing that up for only 1 billion would have been a loss. So that's why they went for 25% TV rights. That way, even if the revenue, let's say, increases, they would still get the majority of it. And I think that's where I would say I would want to come into the fun part here, because Rohit, I think you have a good summary of what has happened, what we have discussed till now. So I would want to ask you, if you were the Barcelona president in place of Mr. Juan Laporta, what would you have done? Would you have had, uh, gone for the levers like he did, or like signing 100% of the TV rights for 10 years that he had, or doing nothing, just relying on academy?
Yeah, I think it's you can see what kind of a situation that Laporta is in, what a hard place he's in. I remember when maybe last summer when he was all doing all of these levers, I had asked you, and you had said that he's in a sticky situation and he had to do something. So, which is why he had to do it. So, if I was in that situation, um, I would do anything I could to keep Messi, which
Hmm.
is maybe something that he tried to do. But looking at everything that he did, uh, maybe I wouldn't have been as proactive and uh, as clever as he was in basically bringing revenue from so many different sources, you know. Mm, other than the fact that I would have tried to keep Messi, um, I would have probably uh, increased my TV revenue or sold my soul to the devil.
I think that's what basically he did when he let Messi's contract expire. In the eyes of Barcelona fans, soul is soul to the devil. But I think there are talks of Messi returning. And
Mhm.
let's see what happens. but um, but yeah, I think I agree. I think letting Messi leave was probably really really hard. But I think I understand why he did that, because Messi's wage comprised of, I think, more than 10% or 15% of the whole squad limit. So as we spoke earlier in the episode, if you, let's say, remove a player, according to La Liga's rules, if you remove a player who comprises of more than 5% of your wage bill, you can sign with 1/2 rule. You don't have to sign with 1/4 rule. So 1/2 rule is where, for example, if I'm signing, let's say, a 10 million player, I have to make space for at least 20 million in my squad or wage bill. So with Messi leaving, we can do that. But if Messi didn't have to leave, or for example, Griezmann didn't leave, that means we had to do make space for 40 million in our wage bill. If if you have to sign a 10 million player, so that'll be like the 1/4 rule that La Liga has in place. So yeah, I think that's probably why Laporta had to do it. But in hindsight, everything, you can look at all the decisions that had to be made. But I think Laporta, chose whatever he had to, with the assembly and all the votes that had gone in, and he put those choices out there. So I think all in all, it has been pretty good, because they were able to, you know uh, stay afloat all this while.
Yeah, I think maybe we can also think from Messi's side, where this is his last 3 or 4 years of playing, and if he has to reduce his salary by that much, more than 50% of what he was earning then, uh, it is unfair to ask anyone that, right? No one will take that much pay cut. So
Yeah, true, true.
it was good. It was a good calculated deal for all the sides, and I feel everything was done to protect Barcelona as an institute also. So that is sometimes to manage big institutions, you have to take tough decisions, and Laporta was this was one of the toughest decision that he had to take, and maybe we have to give him credit to take that by for taking that decision too.
Yeah, that's completely true. A footballer's career is so short that it's very hard to basically ask him to reduce his wages and stay in a club where he didn't really see a future. You know, which is something that you don't really see in footballers' lives. And you come back to another interview that he gave when he was leaving, and I don't think that is something that we could have seen, the emotion that he had for Barcelona when he
Mhm.
was leaving. Fact that we could see it on display was something that was so poignant to see at a point where uh, players are going for so many millions and millions of dollars, and are able to cut their ties for their club that they grow up uh, with.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think I agree also. But I'm also a firm believer of that. I think every person should get paid for their talent or whatever they bring into the table, and that goes across all, I would say, divisions. Or if you're a working employee, if you're really bringing a lot into the table, let's say you're a software coder or anything, you deserve that amount of money. And for what Messi was bringing into the table, I think he deserved that money, and PSG offered him that, and he chose that. I won't hold that against him as a fan as well. At that point, I would say, why not? If
Mhm.
Barcelona's, future was not clear.
All right. Speaking about money, I just remembered one other point that we didn't discuss was the TV rights. So we know that in Premier League, the TV rights revenue is well managed, where a certain portion of a fixed revenue will be given to all the clubs. That is very high. So if you say a big club like Liverpool or Manchester United, getting this much amount of money, a certain portion of their TV money every year consistently, the same amount of money will come to Nottingham Forest, who just got promoted to. Whereas I think it is different in La Liga. Barcelona, Real Madrid are both very, very huge in if you compare with them to other clubs, and the amount of money that you get if you are a club like Almeria, who just got promoted, is different, right? So but there was a CVC deal in place where La Liga offered, where and all the we know that all the 18 clubs signed the deal to get a certain portion of revenue. Uh, uh,
I
18
think,
or 17,
yeah,
17, I
I
think,
think
right?
it's
Mhm.
17. Yeah.
17, or except the publicly owned companies, except at Barcelona, Real Madrid, and Athletic Bilbao. So why do we think they didn't sign the deal? I mean, it is a revenue source of revenue, right? You get instant money too, but why didn't they utilize that opportunity to generate some more revenue and instead go with the levers? There was a lot of talk on this CVC deal too, and a lot of
Yeah, I
controversy
think
created.
most of the I mean the major reason for rejecting that was it wouldn't solve any of the real issues that Barcelona were facing about the squad limit or wage bill or the debt, and it was for 50 years. And CVC, the partner who was bringing in this deal with La Liga and Javier Tebas, La Liga's chief, most of the money would be on infrastructure, let's say 70%, and the rest would be on the squad development. So all that percentage and everything was defined by CVC, not the club. So I would say the more power was given to CVC. That was probably one of the main reasons that these three clubs, Barcelona, Madrid, and Bilbao, which you, like you said, publicly owned, kind of rejected the deal. And also the money involved. It was I would say little amount of money for a long amount of period. 50 years is a long amount of time. Who knows what will happen to the TV rights money after 50 years? We are seeing a lot of rise year by year in Premier League, like you saw.
Hmm.
uh, and same thing can be observed even in, let's say, 50 years. So I think it was right of both of all these three clubs to, for me, in my opinion, to reject that deal.
Yeah, I think one thing I missed when I was saying about the Premier League TV revenue was, yes, we they have an astronomical amount of money that is consistently coming in, and you also have additional revenue on top of it based on how the club is performing. So if the club starts performing well, like the Leicester City season, then they get telecasted more, which means you are earning more money too. So in that way, yeah, Premier League clubs are well managed there. So uh, one other thing that I wanted to ask you was about the deals to the given by Bartomeu to Frankie De Jong, PK, just before he left, right? And this was also, I think, one other tough decision that he had to take, even though it seems morally not right from an outside person point of view. But they went to court saying that they were illegal contracts. Uh, so uh, so we all know Frankie De Jong saga that happened in summer, and like how Barcelona want him to reduce the salary, where he already deferred some wages last season. So these deals, right?
Yeah.
And again, Laporta protecting the institute, prioritizing Barcelona over players. So what do you guys think about this?
So I think we'll have to go back to what I said mentioned earlier in the podcast about the 380 million that was deferred. In that, 150 million or 160 million that was deferred was of these four players: Clement Longley, Marc-Andre ter Stegen, PK, and Frankie De Jong. So what would happen was that they signed the deferral, but they would not just get the amount that they were owed, but they would also get higher amount. Like the amount would increase over year. So that kind of put the club back in jeopardy. And in doing that, Bartomeu just saved 18 million. So there was no point in doing that kind of deal. And I think in what Laporta did was, I would say, uh, take a lawsuit against the
Hmm.
previous board, particularly Bartomeu, against these deals, because in some countries, a special cause for mismanagement of finances is considered a financial crime. So let's say, for example, if you're outgoing CEO and you sign so many deals to harm the
Hmm.
institution, it's considered as a financial crime, and people who are coming in can, take you to court for it. So that's what Laporta did. But many, I would say, media and all kind of portrayed it as a Laporta taking action against their own players, but that wasn't the case. I just wanted to make it clear, though.
Okay. Okay. Got it. So maybe we can move from the boring finances topic to the transfer window. Uh, Barcelona had a fantastic transfer window, uh, and just to give you, you have a forward line where on left wing you have Ferran Torres and Ansu Fati. For striking, you have Lewandowski and Depay. On right wing, you have Rafinha and Dembele, with Pedri, Gavi, and Busquets, and also signing the best La Liga defender for 2020 season in Jules Koundé. And you have the most promising defender in Araujo, still getting out of Champions League group stage. So, what do you uh, first thing is, yeah, very good transfer window, right, for squad rebuilding based on after Messi leaving. So uh, are you excited for the season? And I know it's been pretty disappointing in Champions League, but how is the team shaping up?
I think it's probably one of the most, I think one of the best transfer window we have seen in the recent history. Considering you have named all of the signings that Barcelona have made, Kunde and all, but the main thing was Dembele renewing for lower wages. The second thing was the free
Hmm.
transfers that Barcelona were able to get, like Christensen from Chelsea, Kessié from AC Milan, and Hector Bellerin from Arsenal.
There
So
is
all
Marcus
these,
Alonso also.
you know,
Mm.
um, well, yeah, Marcos Alonso from Chelsea, exactly. But I think it was a swap deal with
Oh.
Aubameyang for some amount. But I agree that these deals kind of, uh, I would say, strengthen a lot of positions and give a good, options to Xavi to work with. So all in all, I would say it was an amazing summer transfer window, and I would like to thank Matthew Alemany for that, because he was imperious in that window. And the other thing I wanted to say was about the Champions League. Yeah, I think a deep run. I think by the time this window, this uh, podcast goes out, we know that Barcelona are virtually out of the Champions League this season. Uh, while drawing to Inter Milan at home, but like you said, Araujo promising and Jules Koundé. I think as you saw in the match, in the Champions League match, Araujo, Kunde, and everybody got
Hmm.
injured in the international break. Even Frankie De Jong just returned from his injury, so he was not at his full
Excuses.
best for to start. So I think, yeah, yep. But I think playing PK from who's been our center back from 2009, and Eric Garcia, who's little unproven in European, I would say, competitions, was detrimental. And having Marcos Alonso as well, So we wanted to replace an aging Jordi Alba, and we got Marcos Alonso to uh, play in this match, because we didn't have uh, other our first starting defenders. So I think, yeah, all in all, I would say it was a really good summer transfer window, and I'm looking forward to La Liga, which is our main goal, and we are currently joint with Real Madrid on top of La Liga. So I'll say I'm glad about the transfer window, and I'm looking forward to La Liga and Europa League. So watch out, Manchester United.
And Arsenal.
And Arsenal. Mm.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Arsenal. I think Arsenal has a really good chance this time, though, Europa League. Yeah.
From where Barcelona were over the last few seasons, and the fact that they were still able to come out of this chaotic period of their history with players like Fati, with Pedri, with Gavi, and Kunde, and Arajo, and with experience of Lewandowski and Depay and
Busquets.
Busquets. The fact that they're looking at Europa League, and the fact that Arsenal fans and United fans are looking at Barcelona falling into Europa League uh, with more anxiousness, and is just crazy, I think.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think we can speak hours on this topic, but it's time to end. We've covered most of the topics, starting with how Messi had to leave the club, followed by discussions on Barcelona's finances, how they navigated through the troubles, how through the troubles and the wage structure issues, and then a slight discussion on the transfer window. I think this was a pretty good discussion. This when we were talking about doing this episode, we found that there was no one place to gather all this information, so we thought this episode will help the people who are listening do that, at least understand what Barcelona had to go through, uh, and how they managed to come out of that difficult situation. So we hope you guys enjoyed this. And if you enjoyed this topic and would like to discuss this further, please post your questions, comments, and follow our social media channels for more of Chai and Busquets. See you.
See
See you
you.
guys. The next one.